Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Carpenter from Park City, Utah PD. Really looking forward to this conversation. We actually chatted offline a little bit, and I was really interested in some of the things that he's doing organizationally, but also his why behind wellness. So, welcome to the show, Chief Carpenter. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Paige.
Of course. No, I'm really looking forward to it. I don't think I asked you offline. How long have you been in law enforcement total?
So 37 years.
Wow.
I'll boast 27 of that as a police chief in three different jurisdictions.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I didn't know this. You've been a police chief for 27 years?
Correct.
Okay, what's the secret? Because we hear a lot that you have, most chiefs have what, like 3 to 5 years? I think
That's
that's
what
the
I say.
longest I've ever heard. So, how do you keep yourself in a position to have longevity in leadership?
I kind of joke about this a little bit, but it's kind of true. I think when you're consistent and honest always,
Mm,
they know the stove is always on. So essentially, you don't have as much conflict because they recognize that you're going to speak from a position of truth. And my job is really to show the mayor and council and the community what their points of weakness are in evaluation of doing the job. And so when I do that, I think it's very, very important that I'm totally transparent
mm.
and that they understand that I support the position I'm giving them. It's not a personal agenda. It's not a political agenda. It's what I believe is what's going to keep our community safe and give us the ability to navigate the environment that we're dealing with today.
So consistency and honesty builds the trust so that you can build that foundation long term.
Yes. We have this mantra. It said, own it, act on it, and answer for it. If you
Mm.
mess up, you fess up and you clean up. And I think those are kind of simple words to live by, but I think it's very important that your people understand that that's the expectation always,
Mhm.
that we're truthful regardless of what the situation is. And we own it, act on it, and answer for it. If we mess up, we fess up and we clean it up and move on.
Yeah, I really like this conversation about humility and accountability, and I think that it takes an incredible amount of self-assessment to be able to say, like, hey, maybe I did mess up here, but I'm going to take that ownership of it. But then I think there's a next like step to it. It's like, then what can you do? What are those actions that you can do to improve yourself and to grow and to learn so that maybe you're not making those same mistakes over and over again? And you said that, like, what is that action that you can take after? So I really like having this conversation because I think sometimes, and this is what I notice, not in leadership, but just in human beings in general, I think that we're so quick to kind of look outward when it comes to like the blame game. But if you can sit here and say, hey, like, I have self-assessment, I have humility, I have accountability, and I'm willing to correct these things and train and put in the reps to be able to be better long term.
Absolutely.
Have you had mentors in your career?
Many, many mentors. That's the one thing I think if you're going to be successful, you early on have to find those individuals that are willing to be totally honest with you. And sometimes it's painful.
Mm.
I was actually just doing a self-evaluation today, and I made one of those comments to my city manager that I'm always trying to seek to be a better version of myself. And in doing that, sometimes it's painful. And I think if we're not scared of the pain, we're willing to grow because growth, obviously, physically or otherwise, is painful.
Yeah.
And emotionally, spiritually, the whole gamut.
I think that when we hear the word change, I think we immediately think that it's negative or it's bad. And I agree with you. I think that sometimes like change can be painful, but I love that you said it's for the betterment. It's for your growth and your advancement. And I think that change can be something that's really positive and that we look forward to. But it is hard to be called out sometimes. It's also hard to call ourselves out and to like look at the reality of, can we do better or did we mess up in a way? And like, is there an opportunity for growth? I was just saying this earlier. I think that a lot of times we strive for perfection, and I think that we put on this face of perfection, which means that we don't have the ability to mess up, right? And so it's harder to take accountability, especially I think the higher you rise in your profession. But I don't think that perfection exists, and I think that obviously we have to strive to be excellent at what we do, and we should be striving to be better. But I think if we say that we're perfect, it's a disservice to ourselves and to everyone around us, because that means that there isn't any room for growth. And we should always constantly be trying to grow.
Well said.
Thank you. Okay, so back to your mentors. You had a lot of mentors, people who helped you along the way. What is the best piece of advice that you ever received?
That, to join the International Association of Chiefs of Police. As a young officer, my chief, his name is Billy Weaver, and great mentor. He told me, he said, they really create best practices for law enforcement. And if you're going to be a chief executive or an officer, and he encouraged me to join as an officer, which I did at 20, I'll bet over 25, 26 years ago. And having an organization that, what is 37,000 members in 177 countries, obviously has a huge influence on shaping best practices of law enforcement globally and certainly nationally. And it's an apolitical membership. And so they're really just trying to do the best things for law enforcement. And because they have 30 plus different categories, such as specialties, everything for patrol, tactical operations, arson explosives, a medical section, legal section, because they have practitioners in all these areas, they can really come up with great end products, and that's been very useful to me in my career.
Do you feel like you always wanted to be kind of a change agent?
Yeah, I didn't want to be a chief necessarily. I never had really the desire to be a police chief. I honestly kind of fell into it. I was working for a city manager, and this is actually a term of endearment. I called her the Iron Maiden. She was a very tough lady. And when she asked me if I would come back and sit on a hiring board for her, I thought, I'd actually be interested in this position. And so I threw my hat in the ring as a very young officer, and I was successful. And from that point, it's no looking back, because once you become a chief, you can't go backwards. Either nobody wants to hire you because you're damaged goods and you were not, you kind of had the inside track, or if you will. And so I had to really evaluate that this is now my new life and I have to put everything into it.
Yeah. Do you think that it's true, this sentiment that in order to create positive change, that you have to promote?
No, I absolutely think you can lead where you stand. And I think we have the only reason I've been successful is because I have hired a lot of people a lot smarter than I am.
I
And
love.
I depend on them. I rely on them. I put myself in a position that I'm vulnerable to them, and it's paid off. I mean, I really think if you give people an opportunity to step up, they'll do it. It's never made sense to me, just because you have rank, that you suddenly have all this wisdom. I don't think that's true. I think people take the opportunities to grow, and you have to give them that opportunity and the grace to make mistakes. And if they do, then we learn from them and move on.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree with you. And, obviously we have different career paths, but I want the people that I work with, they don't work for me, they work with me. I want them to be better than me.
Absolutely.
I really do. I think one, like, how can we develop people? How can we make sure that they have value and that they build confidence within themselves? But one day, like, I want everyone around me, I want my circle to be better than me. And then we inspire each other, and then we grow together. And so I completely agree with you. I love that you said you can lead where you stand. Such a powerful statement.
It's interesting because if you create opportunities for growth and get out of their way, they're a lot smarter than you are, or I am, not you necessarily, than I am personally. And I learned a lot from these individuals that have taught. You can either serve as a good example or you can serve as a bad example, and people make change because they don't want to be like you. You don't want to be the latter. You want to make sure that you're not serving as a good bad example, if that makes sense. You
That
want
makes
to be the
total sense.
ones that you're the tip of the spear. You don't have all the answers, but you're going to do everything you can to reach your searches and get those answers.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense because I've had many conversations on this podcast where everyone's like, yeah, like I just learned what not to do from other leaders to become a better leader. And I never thought of it that way of like, don't let that be you.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be someone that someone's talking about on a podcast someday being like, yeah, I learned all the things not to do.
I've been fortunate that I have some great examples of people that have been wonderful leaders for me. And every chief I've worked for has been really honorable person, and city managers as well. They expected a lot, and because of that, I didn't want to fall short. You'd never want to disappoint somebody that you have respect for, right?
Yeah.
I remember I had a captain that said that you really disappointed me. And that hurt me way worse than having him write me up or anything else. I thought, man, I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah, I think that is a hard word. I even think just growing up, I had my stepdad say that to me one time, and I agree. It's way worse than any sort of discipline because you feel like you let people down, and you really. I think we all want to look back and be proud of the things that we do and feel like we did a good job. And that word disappointment is tough. Yeah,
Yes.
I I do want to circle back a little bit with your experience in IACP. So you were the past president of IACP. You didn't say this, but I'll give you the kudos for this. So you were the past president. What are some of the things that you guys focus on? I know that there's a large kind of blanketed approach on a lot of different topics. I know wellness is one of them, but maybe give us a little bit of an insider view on some of the important topics that you guys were talking about.
Mental health and wellness obviously is a huge, huge one. We have something that called the Trust Campaign. And that was what happened is every year as a new president came in, I can't take credit for this. Dwight Henninger actually was the president at the time. And he said, hey, we need to look at this because every time we have a new president come into IACP, they take on their own initiatives and we kind of lose a lot of momentum. And momentum is very important, obviously. So take the next five presidents in succession, and we have like four vice presidents. So vice president four through at the time they had five vice presidents when I was in. So five through the president, and let's try to pin down the main topics of interest that really we don't want to lose momentum on. So we put all of these different categories into what we call the trust campaign. And it was building trust within our communities because that's such a huge area. And that's a really broad statement. But within that, they had mental health and wellness. They had I'm trying to remember all the other ones. You caught me off guard on this, but they had multiple different avenues that we went down, and that was very important because we wanted to create consistency within the IACP.
What is in your opinion, what is the first step? Because you did say it's broad, and I agree with
It
you.
is.
But what is the first step to building trust?
Well, you have to have relationships within your own community, and you have to know what the nuances in your community are. And I think being honest and open and owning our stuff, meaning good and bad, is very important. If we're not willing to step up and say, hey, you know what? We made mistakes along the way. And, I remember Terry Cunningham, who happens to be the deputy director now of IACP. Um, he was he worked in a community that was very large, and he wanted to go back and actually, and when he was the president of IACP, look at the wrongs that and the struggles that law enforcement had nationally and internationally and take ownership of those.
Mm.
So he owned that in front of 20 some thousand members at the IACP. And it was a tough lift for him, but he did it. And that was a truly defining moment for me as well, saying, if he can do that in this environment, then hopefully I can do that in my own community. And it inspired a lot of us to go back to our communities. Chief Lou Deckmar did this in LaGrange, Georgia as well. He went back to his community, and there were some issues in LaGrange, Georgia that dealt with racism and all kinds of other issues. And he made a point of making sure that he addressed those issues that were separating his community and owned the issues that law enforcement was responsible for. And that really taught me a lesson that, people know that we're not perfect and they want to give you an opportunity to change. And if you're willing to do that, they'll accept you and they'll take they want to change as a community.
Yeah.
I think you have to do that broadly as law enforcement being involved in that and owning all the things that have happened with your history.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple words that you keep saying, and I'm kind of going to relate this to wellness. So, kind of segue a little bit, but you said ownership and consistency. Those were two words that you said a lot. And then you also said honesty. And I want to put this in the context of wellness because this is kind of where my head went is, are we taking ownership of ourselves and our actions when it comes to our own wellness? Are we being honest with ourselves? And are we creating consistent habits that are going to create longevity in our lives or in our career? And I think so often when we talk about wellness, and this is what I hear, I'm a fly on the wall over here, but obviously this is like my work in my space. But I hear a lot of excuses as to why these things can't happen. We don't have time, we don't have resources, XYZ. So I think if we can take these words of how are we showing up externally, you want to have consistency, you want to have honesty, you want to be able to take ownership of things. Are we also applying those same concepts to ourselves in our actions? And so, maybe I would love, kind of your perspective on how do we get people to, because I think that, the conversation is, we're in this actionary phase now. We have a lot of awareness and education about wellness, but now it's how do we get people to take that action for themselves?
So, a typical civilian, we talked about this, may experience 4 to 5 traumatic events in their entire lifetime, where a police officer can deal with 4 or 5 traumatic or more traumatic events in one shift.
Yeah.
And that has a building effect to what those officers are dealing with. So often, as law enforcement, as when I was a young officer, we didn't address these issues. We didn't address mental health and wellness. And it was like, suck it up and go on. And because of that, we had a lot of suicides. In fact, still in the last year, we had over 100 suicides in 2025, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
And, I had an old field training officer that told me, you're expected to solve all these problems when you're out on the road. And then you go home and you're used to being in charge. And we all know that we're not in charge with it. We know that. And then he said, your bride tells you, hey, take the garbage out to the street. And he's like, hey, well, I just dealt with all of these other issues and I was in charge of these issues. And suddenly now there's this this dynamic change to where I'm trying to act in a manner that I'm still stressed. I have this cortisol dump, and I'm trying to figure out how to work through this. So I think everybody has to find out what that is that makes them tick or helps them decompress.
Mm.
And part of that for me was finding what I needed to do to release that stress. And for me, it was always physical. If I could get out and tell my wife, "Hey, I gotta go work out first thing when I get home," then I can do all those other things and be a better husband, be more engaged as a father. But if I don't have that little bit of downtime, I'm not good to anybody. And I
Right.
think that goes back to the honesty, being able to talk to your significant boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, and be able to say, "Look, this is how I process." And somebody it might be totally different. Maybe they want to do a puzzle, whatever. You have your own thing that makes you tick. And if you don't have something like that, then you probably need to identify something that is a stress reliever for you.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that it looks different for everybody. I've had people say that they like knitting. I've had
Hmm.
people say that they like woodworking, being with their horses. I think that to your point, it's not a one size fits all. And how can we identify the things that are going to work for us, and what works for me might not work for you? I agree with you on the physical fitness side. And I also think if someone doesn't know yet what to do, I think it's a really strong um, starting point to just start somewhere. Like start
Hmm.
with something, maybe it is physical. Maybe it's, just start walking, give yourself space to be able to identify things. I think one of the best parts about the physical fitness side of things is that you are in it. Like you're forced to be super present because you're focused on the task at hand, right? You're focused on whatever it is that you're doing. And it gives you space to not be distracted, to then be able to identify other things and have clarity within, your life. And so I always say it's a strong strategy. If you don't know where to start with the physical. Just start
Absolutely.
somewhere. Go for a walk. And then you'll figure it out.
Absolutely. The culture piece of this too is very different. I think law enforcement's changed a lot since I've been in 37 years. It's entirely different. I
Mm,
mean, it is, back in when I started, it probably wasn't okay to say, "I'm not okay. I'm not okay with this." And now it's okay to say, "Okay, I'm not okay." And it's okay to be not okay.
yeah.
And we have resources that can help officers. It's the new reality of policing,
Yeah.
which is great. And we've had to be able to change, because if we don't change, obviously it's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
And I think with the new these new officers, they want to know the why behind it. Before, when I started, it was like, because I told you to do it,
Mhm.
and that's what you did as an officer. But now they sincerely, it's a sincere thing, they want to know why are we doing this. And as administrators, we have to be in tune to that and recognize that the why is very important. And you brought that up, I think, at the beginning of the podcast, that the why is very important, because I think it really answers where we're going, what the future holds, what wasn't working, what's working now, what do we need to do to get better, right?
Yeah. Do you think, I'm really curious about this. And I think it's funny that we both reached kind of a point where we're like, back in my day, like things were so different, but do
Right.
you think that you always wanted to know the why, but maybe it just wasn't acceptable to ask for the why? Because I've talked to some other people about this kind of idea of like, I feel like most people have always kind of wanted to know the why, but maybe we're just too afraid to ask it. But now we're in a situation where maybe it's more acceptable to ask, and so therefore there's more questions.
I think that's absolutely legitimate. I think back, there was my dad was a big why guy though too, so that was good for me. And he was he was military. He was airborne, 11th Division, and during Korea. And I think because I had a dad that was inquisitive and taught me to be inquisitive to my own demise sometimes. I would keep pushing, and sometimes I didn't get an answer that I wanted, but
Sure.
I got an answer.
Yeah.
But so I'm appreciative of the fact that the why exists because it's made me be much more reflective as a supervisor and think, yes, that's a good question. Why are we doing this? Maybe, bad tradition isn't something you want to hang on to, right? Just
Yeah.
because it's traditional doesn't mean it's good.
Right.
It means that we need to continually evaluate and make those changes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what we talked about self-assessment. I think we can assess everything and we can ask ourselves the why. And we can ask ourselves, is this the best way to do it? Is there another way to do it? Is there another way of thinking about it? And, I've had a lot of leaders who are coming out now and they're saying like, because I think in the beginning, to be fair, I think in the beginning, a lot of leadership were almost like annoyed by that. Like, oh, the younger generation want to know the why. Like they're always asking why. Then I had someone that was like, why is it so hard to say the why? Like we want to encourage that. We want to encourage growth and, we want like these younger people to feel like they're valued and that they, have stake in the agency. And so they were like, if you're a leader, and people are asking you the why, tell them the why, and it just was such a simplified, I was like, yeah, like, why is it so hard to say the why?
I think that in an emergency situation,
Right.
sometimes
Yeah,
the
sure.
why is not it doesn't belong. That
For sure.
sometimes it's simply because it has to be because we got to get this task accomplished. So I think you need to be able to evaluate that and say, right now it's a crisis and this is a directive,
Yeah.
and you have to understand the difference between that. After the fact, that's the whole reason we do a hot wash or an after action, an AAR, because we're saying, hey, this is what happened. This was the outcome. What could we done differently? And I guess that's kind of the why. That's why it's important to do these debriefs after critical incidents. And I could do a lot better than I do on these, actually.
Yeah.
I preach that, but at the same time, I think I could be a lot better than I am at that.
I think through these conversations, I have a lot of those moments where I'm like, man, like I could be doing more of what I'm saying right now. So I appreciate you saying that. What you were saying just now, I relate it a lot to sports. Um, every sports team is going to play back the game tape, right? They're going to all look at it and they're debriefing. Even if you win, even if things went really well, they're taking a look and they're saying, how can we do better? Even the team at the end, when they, win the Super Bowl, they're going to celebrate the win. I think it's important to celebrate wins and to be recognized for the hard work and good work you do. But they're also going to go back and be like, okay, how can we get better? And so I think it's this idea of forever evolving and trying to grow in a forward trajectory. And again, it just goes back to what we have been saying this whole time is how do you have those moments of reflection and that opportunity for almost coaching, and that's how I view it. I really think that my superpower and what I try to do is be coachable, be teachable. I think that if you can have that quality and you can recognize that you can learn from everybody, it's only going to make you and everyone else around you better.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit, and you kind of started talking about this, but I would love if you explained it like you explained to me when we first talked. But you were talking about what officers go through on a consistent basis. And when you and I talked, you called it the cortisol roller coaster. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the cortisol roller coaster is making critical decisions all day long, and then you go home mentally exhausted and you're burned out, and you may have you're trying to maintain relationships within your family. And I kind of alluded to that a little bit,
Mhm.
that you're at 110%, and all of a sudden you hit a door when you're coming through, and things are falling apart at home, and you've got to figure out how do I deal with this. But I think that goes back to the honesty piece where we're talking to whoever the relationship we're in. We need have an understanding, and we need to understand what they're going through too, because apparently, there's a lot of things that we're unaware of that happen during the day. If we're out on a 16-hour shift, which isn't unheard of for law enforcement, you're physically, mentally exhausted. And if you don't recognize that you have this cortisol dump and you're coming home, you're not good to anybody. And so I think it's very, very important that you understand what the effects are and how to deal with that.
Yeah. And I think, if we can sit here and have a conversation and say, these things will likely happen, right? You know what happens within your career. It's likely that you're going to go through this cortisol roller coaster.
Uh-huh.
It's likely that these things might happen long term. It might impact your family. It might impact your own personal wellness. If you're on shift work, it's going to impact your sleep. We can take a look at a lot of different things from a wellness perspective and say, hey, these things are probably going to happen. But yet I feel like a lot of what we do is more reactionary versus proactive or preventative. What is maybe your opinion on what it looks like and how someone can be more proactive versus reactive? And this can maybe be from a personal standpoint or from an organizational standpoint.
You mean as it pertains to working shift
Wellness.
work and wellness?
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit about accepting the fact that we're not perfect, that we always want these perfect outcomes, and sometimes we have no control over those outcomes, right? Somebody is predisposed to like potentially. I always thought it was hard when you were trying to address a critical incident and the outcome wasn't what we had hoped it would be.
Yeah.
Somebody either took their life, there was a critical situation that they were severely hurt or injured, and we wanted the outcome to be so different. And a lot of times we tie our own ability to de-escalate that situation to our own value. And I think that's a mistake because, we can't control the environment we're put in. We absolutely are 100% responsible for our own actions, meaning, or inaction, but we can't necessarily control the environment that we were put into. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and I agree with you. I talk about this a lot because I do think it's a partnership. Obviously, like you want to have resources organizationally, but I also think that we can take a look at ourselves and understand there's a lot of things that we can't control in our lives and in our career. But we can control our actions and reactions. We can control the things that we do that help us to offload those things, to down regulate, to make sure that we're well. And you said this a couple times, and I know it's such a like cliche to say it, but I just kept thinking about it as you're talking. It's the oxygen mask. Like you got to put it on yourself first in order to be effective in any other aspect of your life. If you're not good, you can't show up for your team or your community in the most effective way. If you're not good, you can't show up for your family. And so you said that you're like, I tell my spouse, like, I want to be the best version of myself as a spouse and as a dad. So that means I have to go to the gym and I have to do these things to offload it. And we have control over those things. We have control over the things that I would say the habits and the resources that we implement in our own lives. So it makes complete sense. And I agree with you. I think that there's a guy. Have you heard of this guy? His name's Gary. Gary V is what they call him.
I haven't.
Gary Vaynerchuk. It's a little aggressive. He's like a really like out there guy, but he says everything is your fault. And as soon as you can like come to terms with the fact that everything is your fault, then everything falls into place. And so when we talk about wellness, maybe you gained weight. It's your fault, right? It's like if I can say like that's my fault, like I did that, what am I going to do about it now? How am I going to get myself back on track? If I'm having like a mental breakdown and I'm like not responding really well, what can I do? What are the things that I can do? Because at the end of the day, I have control over my actions and reactions.
That's what I meant to say. Actually, we're not responsible for the situation we're in, but we're 100% responsible for our own personal reactions. If we get angry, if we allow somebody else to make us angry.
Yeah.
And I was on a protest the other day on Main Street, and I had somebody yelling in my face with a megaphone, and amplified sound isn't authorized at these. And I was trying to calmly explain this, and it was hard. It was hard to take a step back and say, okay, take a breath and then respond. And and it's important to how we react, and not letting others see that really gets to us.
Yeah, it's
That's important.
incredibly hard, and it's emotional regulation, and it's trainable. And I used to call it the power of the pause because I thought there was so much power in that to be able to like choose how you respond and to be able to take a breath. It takes a lot of restraint and control. And then I had someone tell me they're like, you got to call it a tactical pause because you just throw tactical in front of it and then it's cool all of a sudden. So now we call it the tactical pause. But I think it's trainable. I also think that we're not going to be perfect to your point, like give ourselves grace a little bit. Like if there is a moment where maybe you do react to something in a negative way, how can you learn from that? And I also really find it valuable to have other people in your corner that are going to call you out. My spouse, he is the first to be like, hey, like, I understand that you don't like this situation right now. He's like, and I agree with you. This sucks, but you can't control that. And you're not acting, you're not really responding. And what you can control is how you're responding to the situation. And it's also taken a lot of deep breaths to be able to respond to that feedback, but he's 100% right. Like, I think it's really valuable to also have people that are going to kind of shake our shoulders a little bit if we're acting out.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I do want to talk about one thing that you guys are doing organizationally. I thought that this was really, really interesting. You have a mandatory physical fitness requirement. Tell us a little bit
That's
about
correct.
that.
And so let me tell you, back up a little bit, where this came from. So we've always, 17 years ago when I came here as the chief, they didn't have any physical fitness requirement. And I felt that it was very important that we put a physical fitness requirement together. So I like having involvement from the department. So we have like a Q2 committees that bring suggestions forward to the admin. So it isn't admin always pushing everything down.
Sure.
I really feel this way. I feel like this is the department is the officers and support staff. It's their department, and I've been given the opportunity to be oversee that for the time being. But I hold that in kind of a sacred trust, meaning that when I leave, they're going to own this, good or bad. So I really feel that they have to have ownership in those decisions. So that being said, we had this Q2 committee several years ago that came forward and said, hey, we would like to implement the post standards, which is a mile and a half run, push-ups, sit-ups. Now it's plank. It varies from as time has progressed. The vertical leap. As we went through that process, we have a different level of physical fitness. And at the time, when they did their self-evaluations and evaluations, if they weren't meeting that physical fitness standard, it could cost them a percentage of their pay. And
Mm,
that was kind of a motivator at the time. So we've always had this since I've been here, a physical fitness standard. My background was SWAT and that kind of thing. So I always felt it was very important to be able to do the job, defensive tactics, those kind of things. I felt like you have to be able to physically do the job. So this Q2 said, hey, let us create the criteria of what this looks like. And so they did, and they put together a kind of all-inclusive package. So we started doing that. And then our legal came to us 2 years ago and said, we're a Utah risk management city. And the trend is that the officers in these positions either have to pass a physical mandatory every year or they're unemployable. So that was a kind of a big step.
Interesting.
Because we had a physical in place, we had varying levels of participation. And this was a tough pill for us all to swallow, but we did, and I'm grateful for it. Just recently, we were through the 2 year process, and everybody's made the physical. We have one that's kind of teetering on this, and then we're trying to deal with that right now. But that being said, um, the totality of it has been huge. I mean, people have lost upwards of 50 pounds apiece. We have several people who have some big officers, physically large officers, that have really stepped up and made this happen.
Yeah.
And now they're on the backside of it and they're thinking this is the best thing. And it's become extremely competitive. The rowing, the 2,000 meter row, they're all trying to get sub eights, and it's kind of an incredible thing to watch this process. And, the others are just trying to meet the mark, and that's okay. But that standard, and it is a standard, if it's not met, it has drastic impacts on an officer potentially.
I think this is a really interesting conversation. A lot of agencies are afraid to mandate any sort of physical fitness requirement, especially right now with hiring and everyone being short on bodies. But your experience was that this was something that was really positive, that people are now healthier, happier, more competitive. So now that you're on the other side of it, do you think that physical fitness should be a mandatory standard?
I do actually. I think because it helps mental health as well, and we're called on to perform.
Yeah.
It's like if you're a physician, you have to do your um, advanced life support every year. Have to be able to save somebody's life,
Mhm.
and we have to do that too, obviously at a different level. But that being said, that we if and I'm a working chief, so it's a little different. We're a smaller agency, but we still have 40 guys, and I have 120 contract officers that work for special events for us. And we do a lot of major events, but I need to know that any officer that we put out on the street has the ability to perform their job functions.
Yeah.
And that's been a tough thing. It's been tough for us all, but I think it's been really positive for us. And like I said, also, I think when you create standards within your department, I can tell you we've moved in 17 years, have have grown leaps and bounds where we were. And we really increased the requirements for our officers, the expectations of our officers. And because of that, we've been able to draw the best officers.
Mm.
And our council and mayor have been a big part of that because they made pay to where it's equitable. And in fact, we're probably one of the top three paid agencies in the state. And because of that, we have the ability to draw a lot of great officers. We have a lot of great officers that come from other agencies, but I think if we hadn't changed our culture, which was painful, we wouldn't have the officers wanting to come here. After 8, 10 years on working in other great organizations, they thought this was an opportunity, and I think that they know that they have a certain expectation that they know if they're an officer here, they can expect this type of performance.
Mm.
And we try to give back to them too.
I 100% believe that if you set the bar high, people will rise to the level of that expectation. And the opposite is also true. We have to kind of like find where that sweet spot is, right? Like where is it where people are striving and they can still hit it? And then where is it like unattainable? And I've had people tell me in my life that I set the bar too high sometimes. So I have to like, manage that. Um, do you think that, and maybe this is kind of a three-part question, but you kind of said this before, like change is scary, but change can also be really positive. It can be painful in the beginning, but you get to the other end of it and it's positive. Do you think that wellness equals safety? And do you think that wellness and having that standard helps with recruitment and retention instead of the
Wellness equals,
opposite, which I,
you say wellness equals safety. Sorry about
yep, wellness equals safety. And because I think like I said, everyone's like fearful that they're, going to lose people or they're not gonna be able to hire people if they have a standard. So do you think it equals safety? And do you think it actually helps with recruitment and retention?
So what I found on recruitment and retention, that word of mouth, and cops always talk. They
Mm,
do. They have their own system of communication, whether they're in Salt Lake Valley or in the Wasatch Back. They communicate with each other statewide. And I think when they recognize that they are with like-minded officers,
mm,
meaning that they want to be paid, uh, treated fairly and paid well, that they're okay with an expectation being set on them,
yeah.
and they're willing to step up to that, and that because of that, they find themselves working with others that want and expect the same out of them. I
Mm,
think that makes all of us better, right? I
yeah.
think it does. I think when we know that Joe or Sue have the same expectation, that if I'm not pulling my weight, they're going to tell me.
Hmm.
And these officers tell each other, and they really care about each other. And it's interesting to walk back in the lunchroom and have everybody in there, trying to come off a shift so they can communicate because they like each other, and I think they sincerely do. And that's been a refreshing environment in law enforcement, that people actively like the job. They're here for the right reasons. They're doing the job because they like it. And my goal is to create an environment they can thrive in that.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to mention, and then I'll kind of ask you my last question here, but one of the things that you've said a couple times that I thought was really powerful, and it's something that I try to do too, but so I'll give you an example. I've always taken feedback from everyone. And I tell everyone all the good ideas, all the things that happen are not me. I'm the implementation girl. That's my role. Like I just implement things. And that's what I thought about a few times when you're talking, that like you're creating a culture where people are happier to come to work. There's a standard. People are asking the why. They're coming to you with ideas. They're trying to create um, an environment that is healthier, and you are like the implementation guy. Like you're the one that's taking all of this feedback and you're like, yes, give it to me all, and give all of it to me, and then I'm going to do my best to make these things happen so that you can have longevity in the career. And that's kind of like where my head went through this whole conversation.
I'm grateful that I have a really strong command staff, because I couldn't implement half of this. I'm just going to be really honest, and
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that, because the right people, um, they want to promote. And I think as a chief, that's what you always want to have people strive for, that you have an organization that they want to help lead
Mm,
and ultimately take over for you, right? I mean, that's really what my job is to find somebody to eventually take my place. And as you said, you have employees that are always helping you become better. And I think that's what this environment's all about, is really being able to implement those ideas, and not thinking, hey, it has to be my idea, or it's not a good idea.
mhm.
All my good ideas come from somebody else. I mean, and this isn't, what I'm saying isn't new. I mean, good leaders have implemented this and a much greater things, and I try to find the parts of those I like and implement them.
Yep.
And I think that's, we're very lucky with the fact that we have so much access to different viewpoints now, that we can say, hey, yeah, that sounds right, or no, this doesn't sound right at all, and that's not a fit for us.
Yeah. What would you say to the younger generation, for the men and women who do maybe want to advance in their career, or maybe one day they are going to take your place? What words of wisdom would you share that maybe you wish you would have known earlier?
That to put in for every opportunity that comes about, whether you think you're qualified or not, by putting in for new opportunities. I every time and I had a chief actually told me this. He said, "Hey, I want to see your name every time coming across my desk that we have a new opportunity. Might not think it's a fit, but if it's for the betterment of this agency, I'll make that determination. And if it is, then you're going to grow from that experience." And that's absolutely true. To have this well-rounded background from have trying and trying and failing again, and then finding that, hey, I can do hard things. And this, just because I had a hard time on this doesn't mean that I'm going to not succeed on this future issue.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very important, being able to really challenge yourself and not be afraid of failure, because you become much stronger from learning from those mistakes.
I love it.
A bunch of them.
I love it. Thank you. Chief Carpenter, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here today.
Thank you, Paige. Appreciate it.
Of course.